All right, we are live now. Hello, everyone. My name is Haider Abbas. I welcome you all again to this series of project development with Java and Spring Boot. Fine, I hope I'm audible. Everything is clear here. And already we had some 4 sessions of this entire series. Today happens to be the fifth session, fifth or sixth session. Most probably it is fifth session. We already had 4 or 5 sessions wherein I myself have also taken 2 sessions. We are trying to learn how to develop project using Java and Spring Boot. So the target audience was anyone, is in fact someone from the non-Java, non-Spring Boot background. They can also understand this if they are not focusing on the syntax. Is someone who knows core Java, they can also understand what exactly, how they are going to develop the project using the Spring Boot. Fine, I hope you are enjoying this entire series. Today we will see the remaining part of this entire project. We have already discussed 4 sessions. We have seen how to develop the project, layered approach development. We have seen how to create a Spring Boot project. We also had shown the React application. Today the remaining part we have to code, and then finally we just have to integrate that with the React application and see the final end result. Fine, so let's get into it. So we have already discussed this entire series is about project development using Java, of course. And if you are using Java, then one of the most popular framework which is associated with Java, which happens to be Spring Boot. And you have seen, especially the last session, that how Spring Boot is going to be helpful for you if you want to develop any application. Example, in the last class, last session, you have seen usually any application in that matter, whether it is a Java, whether it is some other language, some other technology, doesn't matter. If you want to connect your application to the database, lot of efforts are required, lot of code you may have to write, you may have to code. However, if you go with the Spring Data JPA, one of the module of Spring framework, nothing you have to do. You just have to create one interface. You need not to give the implementation also. You need not to specify anything. You just have to create the interface. That's all. And then you have to use the methods and implementation. Usually whenever we give the interface, someone has to implement it, right? And we are not specifying that also here. Implementation also will be given at the runtime. So with that note, we also came to one conclusion that it's kind of semi-developed application. If you go with the Spring Boot, Spring framework, half of the efforts will be taken care by the framework itself. You may have to work minimal. That's the advantage of working with the framework. Fine. And now before we get into the remaining part of this course, let me just in this series, the remaining code continuation class continuous session today we are conducting. It's not very first session. We have some sessions. Today is the continuation. Before I continue, just quick update. Recently we have started a live batch Java Spring Boot microservices, wherein 2 to 2.5 months will be focused on Java, wherein we are going to start from absolute scratch. There are no prerequisite. Only prerequisite is your time and the focus. 2 to 2.5 months will be focused on the Java, and then the remaining 4 to 5 months of the time will spend on Spring Boot and microservices, which consist of everything: Spring Core, Spring Boot, Spring JDBC, Spring Data JPA, Spring MVC, REST API development. We'll be discussing about the Spring Batch, we'll be discussing about the Spring Mail integration, microservices, Apache Kafka. All of that will be taken care in the live sessions for 4+ months. So more focus will be Java plus Spring Boot. Absolute scratch will be starting. 2 to 2.5 months will be focused on Java, and the remaining part will be Spring Boot and microservices, because at the end of the day, that is what required in the industry. Link also you can find in the description. So there are some offers also. If you are interested, if you feel that you want to learn in detail, then you can definitely take that course. Alongside these things live, there are some complimentary recorded also will be given to you, such as JUnit, SQL, Docker, JDBC, Servlet. Such concepts also will be given in the form of recordings. The entire details you can find in the website also. You can go through the link which you can see on the description. Fine. If you are interested to learn everything in detail, very clearly, in a live interactive manner. Fine. So having said that, let's continue the discussion where we had stopped. We had already started the development in the last 4 sessions we have done quite development. So let me just open the IntelliJ. All right, fine. So before I show, let me just specify here also. Layered approach development is what we are following. We have the React application, the front end part, the React application we have. All right. In the backend part development, we have seen we have pre-developed application here. Our team has developed in the very first session and the second session. Both we have seen it. Today also at the end we will see to it. In the backend part, Java and Spring Boot comes into picture, wherein we had multiple layers. We had the controller layer. Here we have to write the code which is responsible to interact with the React application and take the request and response back, right? That's all things we have to take care here. Fine. Now again we have a service layer, and then we have the DAO, persistence layer. And logic, persistence logic, you need not to write. Some facilities already available. Here we are going to use one of the module of the Spring framework, which happens to be Spring data JPA part. Okay, data JPA. And here we are going to use the logic which is already available. If you are going with the Spring framework and if you are using Spring data JPA module, whatever code is required to establish connection to the database and perform operations, you need not to do. Everything will be taken care by Spring. You just need to know how to use. And last class you have already seen that. You if you are a part of the last session, you got the idea. We just called the save method, right? We just called the find all method. Where is the implementation? It's already there. Spring has provided, right? And here Spring MVC is what? To develop the REST API. We have developed the REST API in the third session itself. Second and third session we have implemented service layer also in the third session. The last class, some part in the service layer, we had to use the facility which is already available in the Spring data JPA, the persistence logic, which we need not to develop. Spring has already provided. That we need to use, and that we have already discussed. Let me just quickly give you the path of the code which you can see on your screen. As you can see here, these are our APIs. We have an API. This API endpoint will be requested by the Spring, the React application. Of course, they will be getting one student object in return, and if they want to retrieve all of this, then they will request this endpoint. So all the endpoints are ready to perform this operation. Fine. So get student by ID, delete student by ID. Update part, it will be left to you as an assignment, because if you have developed these many APIs, one API you may have to work around, which is for update based on what is the requirement which is there in the React application. As an assignment you can take. Majorly these APIs we have developed in the last, the third session itself. In service layer you can see, of course, this is a specification what need to be implemented in the service layer. We have seen two things: saving the student in the database and getting all the records which are already there in the database, right? And then we have finally student service implementation. Student service implementation, wherein we have implemented these things. Now, this is the code which is responsible to store your student object in the table in the database. Database could be anything. It could be HT, it could be PostgreSQL, it could be MySQL. This is the code. Now, where is this implementation? That is the implementation will Spring Data JPA will take care. Proxy classes, there are at the runtime, proxy classes will implement that. So you need not to worry on that. This implementation already there from the Spring framework. As a developer, you have to just use the persistence logic which is already developed by Spring framework team, right? So in the service layer, you're just going to use the persistence logic which has already been developed. I'm just calling repo.save. In the repo is of what type? Student repo. Let me open that also here. Student repo. It's an interface which is extending JPA. Now, did I specify anything here? No, I have not specified, because already the moment you say extend, all the methods have been inherited here, and for that implementation at the runtime, proxy class will take care. That is how this framework has been designed, and directly I'm just using it. I'm just telling here save. That's it, which you can see. Now remaining implementation we have to do here, and then we are good to go. Is it fine? Yes, no, maybe. Previous sessions are on the YouTube. Okay, it's there, you can see in the live sessions basically, because everything has been done live, so you will be finding that in the live only. All right, so remaining sessions are available there, if that is fine. Done. So let's move ahead. Let's give the remaining implementation. I have to take care of now saving, fetching all the students is done, and then now we'll focus on fetching student by ID, only by ID, and then the delete part, update part, the one part you have to do as an assignment. Fine. So now let me just go here. In my controller, I have an API. Whoever will invoke, reach this endpoint, they will pass ID. That ID I will take, and that ID I will pass it to the method which is available in the service layer. Fine. Now in the service layer, I have to develop a method which can take student ID receiving from the controller to the controller, who will give that React application will collect from the end user, and then React application will request my endpoint at the backend and will give this ID. In my controller, I have an API which is receiving the ID, which you can see here, which is receiving the ID. Making sense? And that ID, whatever I have received here, I am going to pass it to the service layer. And now in the service layer, I should be developing the logic. All right, which can receive one ID, and then using that ID, it should invoke the student object from the database. That logic I have to implement here. And in the service layer, it's always recommended to code to interface as per the strategy design pattern. Directly you should not get into the implementation, though you can directly write a method which can do that, but it's good to specify that in an interface first, that what you are going to do in the interface, and then implement. That will be a great deal. Fine. So now I will say here, public return type has to be one student object, because getting the data by ID only, and whatever the method name you want, you can give. I'll say here, get student by whatever name you want, you can give by ID. All right, and this will receive integer type of ID. Now who will pass this ID here? This ID will be passed to me by the controller class, the REST API. And how REST API will get this ID? From the React application. How React application will get that ID? Student, the end user of our application, they will pass the ID. React application will collect it and give it to the API, backend API, which is there in the controller layer. Controller layer, I have got the ID. That ID I'll give it to the service layer. In the service layer, I should be writing a logic. By taking this ID, go to the database, fetch the data, whoever is this ID, and return back the actual object. And while implementing, I'll be writing a simplest code. If you want, you can optimize, you can write in a better way also. Whenever you fetch something, first see whether it is there or not, only then you can return. But directly I'll be writing the logic which is responsible for that. Now I would like to go back here, and now I have to add this unimplemented method. So let me just add it here. Implement the methods. Wow, wonderful. Now here I have to write the logic. What is the logic you have to write here? You have to write the logic which is responsible based on this ID, which is fetching the data from the database. Now, to fetch the data from your application to the database, persistence layer, DAO layer is responsible. Persistence logic, that means a logic which is responsible to connect to the database, fetch the data, store the data, DB related operations. Do we need to perform here? No. Spring Data API has already given to us. Some implementation is already there. So I will just use the repository reference variable. I need not write that logic. I just have to call the methods which has been already implemented by the Spring Data API. I will say as repo dot. Now we can say here, we have many methods here. Okay. I would like to go with find all. We have find. Okay. We have find by ID. See, I'll pass this ID here. It will give you the return type as a student object, and that student object, if you want, you can collect it back. I would like just directly return. I will say return the student object. Fine. Is it not the return type? Oops. Okay, it's an optional. All right, no problem. I'll do one thing here. Let me just collect it as an optional only, not an issue. I'll say optional type, optional. It's like a container. okay, which can hold an object. It will help you. A lot of things are there. Now, right now, I don't want to get into that. So this is an optional which will have student type of data. Okay, great. And from that, I would like to collect it. How to collect it? I'll say here optional dot get. I will say here get student object, and whatever it will give me, that I will be returning to the caller. Finish. Okay. Now, what exactly this is, need not to worry. If I just receive the ID which will be given to me by the controller, that ID I'm passing here, find by ID. Based on the ID, the data student object will be fetched from the database. Making sense? The data will be fetched from the database, and that data, it is a student object. Directly it is not giving the student object, it is giving like, please make a container ready so that you can keep this object. So I have an optional here. Within this I have a student object. At the end of the day, within the optional we have a student object. Fine. Now that student object I am just returning to the caller of this method. And who is going to call this method? Controller. Okay, let me open my controller here. If you are part of this series continuously, if you know all the layered which we have developed, and if you are focusing, definitely you will understand here. So now I have to invoke this logic. So I will say here, what is the service layer reference variable? Service layer reference variable which we have created is service. Wonderful. So I'll say here in the business layer, which is service layer, dot, I have written one method, get student by ID. That ID I will pass here. It will give me one student object. It will give me one student object. That student object I will collect it here. I will say here student. Let me just give it as student. Okay, st, student. Fine. And that student object I will pass to the end user. Directly also you can pass the entire student object, and it's better to pass with the response entity. So that response entity means you can just pass the response header also, response body also, status also. So everything you can pass. So it's better to give that. So let me just say here, return this student object I want to return to the end user right now. Is it making sense? The videos you can find in the live session. If you go to the Telescope, you can just check live sessions. All these 5 sessions happen live, so you can find it there only. Okay. So this is the 5th, 6th session. This is a continuous session. Of course, directly if you jump into the code, it may look rocket science, but there is nothing here. It's the most easiest part. So straightforward it is. Only thing you might face difficulty to understand is if you are not part of the sessions previously. That's all. Fine. Okay. Great. Fine, guys. Now directly also you can return, no problem. I would like to also return based on the status also. So what I can do here is, I'll say return. You can create a response entity object. Inside the response entity object, you can keep the body, student, and also the status code. Like that also you can do. I will say here new response entity, and here I'm going to work with the student object, option number 1, and of course student object. And here I can pass this student, and number 2 I can pass status code, HTTP status. I will say here dot OK. That means everything is fine, or dot created, or dot fetch. See, okay, many of them are there. Bad request, if it is ID is not proper. If you want to check here whether ID is correct or not, based on this, you can just give different types of HTTP status. You can write here okay if everything is fine. Either this, or you have to write here response entity within the student. Or since I have given the return type student, you can also do something like this. I will say here return response entity. I will say here dot okay. And here I will pass the body. What is the body? Student is the body. Both of them are same. Or directly student object also you can return. That also should not create any problem. Now I have given student here. If you want, you can give. If you are passing directly, maybe like this. If you are returning 3 options also, let me give it. The student object I am returning option number 1. Then no problem. Option number 2 is this. Option number 3 is this. And here it cannot be student right now. It has to be response entity. Let me just give it as response entity. And of course, it has to be student type of data. Done. Fine. So it's like good way to respond back. If you just respond student, that means directly is JSON data you are responding to the request which you are receiving. Though you can do that, there is no harm. One student object automatically will be converted to JSON data, and the JSON data will be given to the React application. React application can render that object into the client and give it to the end user. There is no issues in that, but it's recommended to give a proper response, and I'm just wrapping this student object within the response entity, and also I'm sending the status. All three are same. If you're directly returning student, then it has to be student only the return type, or you can go with either the option number 2 or option number 3. Both of them are fine. So let me just do it here. Now let me just go for the delete. Of course, I am going to receive an ID here. This ID will be given to this API. That means there is a React application. That React application will raise this endpoint and will pass one ID here. That ID I have received from the React application, and React application, how he got, React application got the ID. React application got the ID from the end user. So from the end user, the one who is using our application, React application collected the ID, that if whoever want to delete, upon clicking delete, React application, there is a logic written, will collect the ID who is requesting for delete. That ID in the React application, there is a logic which can make a request to this API endpoint, pass it. Now I have received this. Now what I have to do is this ID from here, I will be passing to the service layer. In this service layer, I will be receiving that ID. That ID I will again, okay, he'll be back. Sometimes since I've taken 2 sessions, I would like to just continue. Naveen Reddy sir is part of this channel continuously, and you can find him almost every week, every video. Okay. Most probably the last video as well. Alright guys, here I have to write a method which can take the ID from the controller, from the API, and after receiving the ID from the API, I will use that ID, use the persistence logic, and do the deletion part. Now, do I need to develop a logic to perform, to connect to the database table and to delete and all of that? No, because we are going to use Spring Data JPA. And if we are going to use Spring Data JPA, do we need to worry on that part? Of course not. We should not take care of this because Spring Data JPA we have. So already some methods are there. So let me just go and provide the specification that what I want to develop here. Fine. If you are a part of the sessions, I hope you are following continuously, right? So now I should be writing a specification. What need to be done? I will say here public, and I want to delete something, so I know what to return. Though you can write a better code here, I will be writing simple, because the delete method of the Spring Data JPA, the return type is void, and if the ID which you are passing is wrong, then it might lead to exceptions and problems. So you can write in a better way. Maybe you can just find the ID and check whatever user has passed, whatever is there in the database, whether if they are matching, then you can go for the deletion. If not, you need not to go for the deletion. All of that you can do, but here directly it is void. I just want to delete it by assuming whatever ID will be passed, that ID is correct only. Now I'll say here delete student by ID, and whoever will invoke this method, they will pass ID to it. ID. All the layers which I am talking, I hope you could able to relate that, right? So everywhere I'm talking layers, which we have discussed in the last 4 sessions extensively, especially the second session onwards. First section was introduction. We have seen the fundamentals, and then we got into that layers fundamentally in the first session, second session, third session, and last session also, and today also. I'll say repo dot, we have a method called as delete by ID, and the return type is void. It will not give you anything. It will not return you anything. It will just delete. So I'll pass this ID. Matrix close. This ID I'm passing. Done. Now I have to go back to my controller, the REST API. REST API has received one ID here. That ID I'll be just passing to, I will say here repo dot, of course not repo. Of course, I'm not using the persistence layer here. It's a REST API. This API will receive the ID from the React application. After receiving the ID from the React application, as a controller, as an API, I have to collect it. I have collected it. After collecting this ID, I have to pass it to service layer. So let me just do that. Service layer logic we have developed. I'll say dot. We have many methods. Delete by student. All right. I'll pass this ID. Now in the service layer, you have written the logic. You have used the persistence logic, which is provided by Spring Data JPA, right? Which is provided the JPA repository, which is a part of the Spring Data JPA module, using which you are performing the deletion operation. Fine. Yeah. So let me just save this. I mean, if you are part of the sessions non-stop, there is no issues here. So backend part, I hope it is ready. Let me just save this. No issues. Save this. In the last class, I think the database part is also over. We are going to use H2 in-memory database. In place of in-memory, you can use MySQL also. You can use Oracle also. You can use Postgre also. Only part which will change is the configuration part in the application.properties. That is the only part which will change. Apart from that, rest of all will remain same only. Fine. So what is the port number we have given here? The port number is 8181. Now, this port number, wherever our application is getting deployed, that place also we have to make the changes in the React application, so that React application can smoothly request our endpoints and access the results. So this is about the backend part. Backend part is ready now. Apart from one logic, one part which is updation, and we want you to do that part, because if you have understood these many APIs for fetching all the records, deleting, fetching by ID, registering the students, then one API to update you can give a try. That is up to you. Front end is ready for that. Only the backend API part you may have to try. Apart from this, the remaining part is ready. So all the APIs are ready. From the React application, if you want to register something, then they have to request this endpoint. Wherever our application is deployed, that address they have to give. Whether it is deployed in the local system, in some server, or in cloud, doesn't matter. Wherever your application is deployed, this backend Spring Boot application, React application has to reach to that. Then has to make a request to this endpoint. If you're making a request to this endpoint, then pass the student object. Now here, I will receive the student object. By making use of the other layers, I'm storing that student object into the database. So all the APIs are ready. All the endpoints are ready. Now front end part, we have to integrate and check if it is working very, very fine. Will it work with the MongoDB as well? MongoDB, we have a different repository for that. Though Spring Boot supports MongoDB also, right? The way to work here, you need not to use the repository or JPA repository or CRUD repository. We have Mongo repository also. That repository you have to use. Spring Boot supports MongoDB, and of course 100% yes, you can go with the MongoDB also, no problem. The only difference is, if you're going with the MongoDB, then this part you should not extend CRUD or JPA repository. Here Mongo repository is there, that you have to extend. And the configuration, whatever we have done for the H2, right? H2, PostgreSQL and MySQL, Oracle, all of them are relational databases. MongoDB is NoSQL, non-relational. It's a document based, right? So of course there, that part in the application.properties also you may have to make the changes. But this application, if you make the changes, 100% can work with the MongoDB also. Only part which we may have to change is the facility which you are using, right? The JPA repository part, the configuration in the application.properties, only that part you have to make changes, and rest of the application will work. The APIs, you need not to do anything. Front end, you need not to do anything. Only the small changes at the back end, you can connect this to the MongoDB also. There is no problem, Karthik here. Fine. This part is also clear. Now let's take a quick 2-3 minutes of break, and then we will integrate this backend which is ready with the front-end React application and see if everything is working in our favor, and then we can have a conclusion. Fine. So see you all for the integration of the Spring Boot application which we have developed in the past 4 to 5 sessions with the React application. The final part we will see post break. All right, we are back now. Now we have to get into the last part of our discussion. Our backend is ready, front end is ready. From the beginning of the series, we just have to integrate that. That's a part which is pending right now. That is a focus. And once we could able to integrate that successfully, then our application is working. And also, been asking that when will the front end and the back end, the code will be shared. This will be uploaded on GitHub and the repository link will be shared in the description very soon. Maybe just after the class gets over, within some time, we will try to upload how much ever early possible. Maybe today, tomorrow, you can just find out in the description. You will be getting the link also. Fine. That's what we need to focus on. Now, let me just get into the code where we had stopped. Great. So this is our backend and these are our endpoints. Great. Let me open the React. So this is our React application. You can see the endpoints API students, but you can see where my application is deployed. This part is there, no? HTTP localhost 8080. This is the place where the application is deployed. If you have deployed in some server, that address you have to give here. If you have deployed on cloud, that path you have to give here. Where is your application? If you are, since I'm deploying in my local embedded Tomcat server, which is there with the Spring Boot, so that is the reason HTTP localhost and the port number 8080. I think the port number which our application is working is on 8181. By default, if you don't specify anything, the default port number is 8080. Let's check if you could able to deploy on the default port number. If not, in the entire React, you may have to make the changes. Okay. So now this is the endpoint here also 8080 API student, or delete the this is a component to delete. This is to fetch all the students, fetch students. So then we have edit part. You may have to take care, add the student, and you can see here this is the endpoint. Endpoints are correct. So student is the endpoint for different types of request. We have used different. So let me just see if we can deploy our Spring Boot backend application in 8080 port number only. Okay. So let me open the IntelliJ here and I would like to go to the application.properties. I would like to not specify anything for now. That means if you don't specify the port number, by default Spring Boot application will be deployed in your local embedded Tomcat server in 8080 port number. Fine. And if there is any other application, I'm not sure if it is anything is there. If it is there, then we have to make the changes. So let me just open this. All right. And now I would like to just deploy this application. Right click. I will say here run this, or you can say run as the Spring Boot application, whatever you can. There is no problem. I would like to deploy this. It is getting deployed. Fingers crossed. All right. Database queries. I hope there is no problem there. Am I getting, yes, endpoints are getting created. 8080, is there anything? Initialize with 8080, no problem. Okay, application started on the port number 8080. Wonderful to see this. And that means this port number was free. Now, before I redeploy, I would like to stop this application. I'm stopping this application. I just have to use one annotation here. What is that annotation? I will go to my REST API. In my REST API, I have to use one annotation which will enable the integration of React application to the Spring Boot application. Two ways are there. If you want to do globally, then you have to do the configuration using a separate configuration class. If not, if it is a one controller, minimal things are there, then you can just go with this, a one annotation which happens to be cross origin. Okay, cross origin. I would like to open this, and here, where is the application? I will say here origins. Where is your application? Where exactly it is that you have to specify. Where your application is deployed, that address you have to specify. So let me just open the browser. Our application, the front end React application is deployed, and this is looking something like this. This entire path I have to give. It's already deployed. Okay, this is a React application, beautiful application. Okay, I would like to just go to my IntelliJ, and now I would like to just specify this. Okay, I've added this. This is the place where our application is deployed. For this application, enable everything. He can make get request, post request, delete me a request. That means I'm telling there is an exception for this application which is deployed in this particular port number in this server, and whichever application is running on this server on this port number, that application can make a request to all the endpoints which we have created here. They can make get request, post request, delete request, whatever request they want, and they can integrate, they can make a call to the APIs which we have developed. Permission, I'm telling, like, yeah, this application is permitted, granted. And though it is developed in some other technology, some other stack, that application can make use of the APIs which has been developed here. Let me make the changes here. Making sense? This is something which you may have to do it. Fine. I think Deva, we will be sharing the front end code. Okay, that will be soon shared. It will be added in your description. The entire GitHub repository only will be added. You just have to clone it from your application, right? So now again, I would like to redeploy my application. I'll say right click, run as. That means I'm deploying the application. My application is deployed. All right, started on this port number, and the moment my application is started, let me just see if there are any changes here. I will say here new student, some student I will add. I'll say here Naveen, or maybe I'll say here Harsh. Okay, and here I will say maybe Harsh @Telesco, for example. Okay, I will say here Harsh is from the example Jaipur, and phone number and the class name 10th grade, maybe the father name is Raval. I will click on add student and see if it is really working. I'm clicking on add student. Oh, there is some issue in the integration. It has to work. All right, no, it says not. So let me open the front end part. Is there any issue? I'm making my first project of my class using this workshop. Wonderful, wonderful, Nigel. Good to see that. Nandu, is there any issues in the backend? Wow, wow, wow. There are some issues at the backend. There are some issues. That means I'm getting the data here, and after this there are some issues. Create the breakpoint. IDs must manually assign before calling the save method. Okay. Identifier generation, create the breakpoint IDs for this class. Okay, let me just cross check what exactly the issue. I'm getting the student object, guys. You can see here there is no problem. All right, I think I've given the father name also. It should also come. And am I expecting ID also? Is it not auto generated? Am I not taking? Yes. Let me just go here. All right, here ID it is expecting me to pass. And because we have ID also here, that is a one part. Is cross origin used only when port is other than it? No, that is not related to port. Port number is other than, that means you have to make the changes in your application or properties for the backend where your application is running. If it is running in some other port number, then you have to make the changes at the front end, at the React application part, not here. Fine. So cross origin is not for that. It is for the different purpose. It is to integrate your React application with the Spring Boot. It is to make the eligibility of a React application making request to the APIs which is there in the simplified way, if I have to say, in the front end, in the controller part, not for that. Fine. So it is expecting to pass the ID also. That's it. Nothing apart from that. Okay. So now I would like to just stop this. For time being, what I will be doing here is whatever student object I am receiving, it is telling that ID is not there. ID is not here, and that is the reason. And we are expecting it to pass the ID also. Okay. So I'm printing here, right? Student data is name, email. I'm getting that. So what I'll do here is I will do one thing here. I will say student dot. You can use auto generated one annotation ID auto generated. That part also you can do if you want. So set ID. It's of long type, is it? I'll say here 1L for example. Every time you cannot set 1L, it has to be different. Let me make it auto generated. Let me open this. If I have to save this, I would like to open my student class ID. All right, it's a long type, not the integer type. Okay, there is an annotation called as generated value. Okay, and here we have to write one of the properties here, strategy equals to, and here I will say generation type dot auto. For any database it should fit. If it is MySQL, then you have to give here dot identity Oracle sequence. So auto means it could be for any NoSQL. Okay, let me just save this, and I'll also make the changes in all the other places where I'm taking the ID as an integer. It has to be long type ID. Okay, let me just make it as long type ID. Done. And here I have to pass, I would like to go to my controller, the implementation of the service layer. Everywhere I'm just making some changes here. Okay, it is long type of ID. All right, done. And here also it has to be the long type of ID. Of course, I have to make the changes there also. In my service, it has to be the long type of ID, not this thing. Okay. Long type of ID, that's done. I'll make the changes here. If the changes are made here, I have to make the changes here also. Okay, it is expecting me to pass integer only, or required type is integer. All right, so I'll make the changes here. Let it be integer. I can just make one change. What is the change if you ask me? I'll go here also I'll make it one change. What is the change if you ask me? I'll go here, and here I'll make it integer. That's all. The game is over. Finish. I'll make the changes to integer, and here, okay, return the long type of ID. Getters and setters for this has to be changed to integer. Let it be integer. Of course, it has to be integer. I'm making some changes, guys, based on the bug which we have got here. Okay. All right. So the issue is resolved here also. In my controller, I hope I can just go with this integer only, not an issue. Okay, integer only, not an issue. All right. Let me just stop this application. I hope I've stopped this application. I would like to redeploy this. You can just go through the videos which are available, Atul, in the Telescope channel, and you can also watch the 5 sessions which we have conducted recently. Entire course is also available, and if you can pay and if you want to learn everything in depth, there are live courses also available in the Telescope. One new batch has started. If you want to pay and learn in detail for 6-7 months, end-to-end Java, Spring Boot, microservices in a live class, right? Then you can pay. If not, in Telescope only, there are many series available which you can watch it. You have to make the arrangement, right, Karthikeyan? This is a React application. All of us in React application, if you have to make the request, that two different type of HTTP request to these APIs, that annotation, that is a React and the Spring Boot application integration part. And if you want to know more on this, you can also go through one assignment, little more detailed video on CORS. Just search on this on YouTube or anywhere, or ChatGPT or whichever tool, you'll get more ideas on that. Okay, just go through on that. All right, let me just save this, and now again I would like to deploy. Integration is successful, guys, because I could able to see here, right? So let me now redeploy this application. Right click, I'll say here run as the application again, Spring Boot application. My application is fine so far, I guess. Yep. I would like to go to my browser. I would like to just go here. This is my application. I will say it's in memory, right? I'm not getting any data. You have to add it. If it was any predefined databases, then you would have got something else here after adding one student. I will say here, maybe I'll say here Sushil. Okay, I will say here Sushil, maybe Sushil at the rate any name, just to check if you are getting or not, at the rate telesco.com. I'll say here telesco.com, and here address I'll say here Jaipur, phone number, class name 10th or something, anything you want. I'll give it as Raval. So we do have this. I will say add the student. I'm getting this. The application is working fine now. Making sense? Now if I want to add edit part, that is update part, that you have to take care. Deletion, I can do it. So let me add one more student. Okay, all of a sudden all the students are, that is how the React application is rendered. Even if you just fetch it, all the students you will be see on, you'll be able to see on your screen. So let me example add any student. Example Karthikeyan. I will say here Karthikeyan, and I'll say Karthikeyan. Okay. All right. I'll say Telescope for example. I will say here BLR Bangalore. I will say here class name maybe 12th, and the father name I'm not sure. I will say here Bengali. Don't mind if it is wrong. I will say add this student. See, my React and Spring Boot is working fine. Example, I want to delete something. I would like to just delete. Data is gone. Yeah. Oh, I am taking the most part here in the Telesco, Atul. It's a paid course. You can think of it. Okay, good to see you want to learn from me. Anyway, individual choice. Some of the videos you can see which is mine available in the Telesco, and if you want to learn from the scratch, there is a course available in the Telesco. The description link you can get it. All the details have been mentioned. That course, Java from the scratch, for 2.5 months the focus will be on Java, and 4.5 month focus will be on Spring Boot and microservices, more on the application development part. Fine, it's covering almost all the modules of Spring framework, including microservices, in a live class. Apart from this, 5 to 6 courses will be given as a complimentary: DSA, Git and GitHub, JUnit, SQL, Docker. These things will be given as a recorded. You can find these details. I think the course details, one of the video in the Telesco also it is mentioned if you want to know more on that. So that's all. Our application is working fine. We could able to integrate the React and the Spring Boot, and we could able to develop the Spring Boot backend application. All the APIs are working fine here. I would like to stop the backend application, and this entire application will be given to you in the description by adding into the GitHub profile. Directly, if someone is a part of today's class, of course, you might have seen some stars. You, without going to NASA or ISRO, you might have seen stars here only in the live session, because of course everything is new to you. But if you are a part of this entire series from the beginning till the last, I'm pretty sure whatever multiple layers I'm talking about, what exactly this controller is, what is service layer, what is this persistence layer which Spring Data's API is giving to us, and what is happening here, that you know easy to understand. Yeah. Do you have the project only batch yet, Rini? I know you have this request from long time. That I know is in the discussion. We'll let you know if anytime soon. Okay. But there is a plan, but not yet right now at this stage. Alright guys, those who are new to this entire series, you might have focused the approach here. Example, if you are going with the persistence logic responsible to connect to the database, we did not do anything. We are using the facility which is already available. So why people are mad behind the Spring Boot framework? Why they are asking Spring Boot? Remember one thing, if something is trending in the industry, for the Java backend, Spring is trending. Why Spring is trending? Because something is easy there. So if something is easy, only then people learn that, want to learn that, and there is a demand for that. People want to use it to make the process easy. So your focus should be on the approach of development in the 5 series which we have done. If you know core Java, maybe you can try to understand the syntax also. If you know proper core Java, If that also you don't know properly, then you can just at least understand the fundamentally the control flow, that is more than sufficient. Okay. So that's all, my dear friends. In this entire series, we could able to develop the backend application, all the APIs, how to develop the REST APIs using the Spring Boot. We have seen that it's very easy to develop the REST APIs. You can see all the APIs are there. How to integrate the React and Spring. This is what we have understood here in this entire series. So basically, what we have understood, we have seen Spring Boot framework, how to create the project, Spring Boot, how to develop the project in general. In that, we have seen how to develop the REST APIs. REST APIs. How to follow the layered approach development. Layered approach of development. Also, we have seen React and Spring Boot integration. Spring Boot integration. Right, and we could able to develop the in the process. We have seen if we use Spring Data API, what will happen, what is the service layer, how the data is passed, all of this also we have seen in the process. Of course, the React application is predefined one. We just have shown that how they're making call to our endpoints. Fine, and their first part of the endpoint, whatever they're making, right, HTTP, this is subjective, where your application deployed. The actual endpoint is whatever they are using at the end, student or students or whatever it is. These are the endpoints. It's a port number where the application is deployed, where it is deployed, and what is the endpoint. And they are making use of our APIs. That part also we have discussed in this entire series. Fine. So if you know Spring already, I'm pretty sure you have understood everything. By chance, if you don't know the Spring framework, if you know Java, at least you have understood the approach of development and you got an idea that how using the Spring Boot we can develop the project. If you're new to the world of Java only, to the world of Spring Boot only, at least you got an idea how Java or Spring Boot is used. If you don't focus on the syntax part, okay, syntax by default you'll understand if you spend some time. Every application, the syntax as a developer you will not focus as per the need. You just have to understand the language or the technology, how it works. Automatically, if you just play around with some code, if you just practice some applications, by default you will be comfortable with the syntax. All right. Oh, Atul, any recorded lecture of yours? Me and Naveen sir together, one backend course is available in the Telescope, which is recorded. Complete Java Developer Batch 2. 6 months it is. If you want everything once, then it is Complete Java Developer Batch 1 recorded, wherein Naveen sir recorded is most part and my part is also there here. 30% of my recording, 70% plus recording is from the Naveen sir. Both me and Naveen sir combination recording is available. Okay. So there are some more plans of future courses, Hindi courses and many things which you will be getting the updates from the Telescope. For now, this is the end of this entire beautiful series on Spring Boot, or you can say project development with Java and Spring Boot for no voice. Fine. So it was a wonderful series. Thank you so much everyone for being with us in this long series, giving your valuable time. And in the 5 sessions, we could able to understand these many things. Okay, this is the part which we have understood in the last few classes. What is the project? How to develop this? And REST API part, layered approach development, all the layers, how we have to design, and finally React and the Spring Boot integration, which is quite easy, which is not a rocket science. Fine guys. Thank you so much for being with us in this entire series. It was wonderful to be with you. We'll meet again in future for upcoming sessions or if you have any plans on the new series. Thank you so much guys for being with us.